I was sitting at the end of a long mahogany table surrounded by chandeliers, champagne glasses, and laughter that didn't belong to me. They called me poor, right there in front of everyone. My daughter-in-law tilted her perfect little head and said, "Ryan, maybe your mother shouldn't sit at the head of the table. That's for family." I heard every word, every syllable sliced through me like glass. I smiled because that's what women my age are trained to do, smile through humiliation. What none of them knew was that the real owner of the company that had paid for that dinner wasn't sitting at the head of the table. She was sitting right where they told her not to sit, quietly watching, calculating. And that woman was me. It's strange, isn't it? You can raise a son, feed him, dress him, send him to school, and one day he looks at you like you're an embarrassing stain on his polished life. I used to think betrayal was loud doors, slammed voices, raised tears. But no, betrayal whispers. It whispers in boardrooms and dinner parties, and in the way your own child doesn't meet your eyes when others mock you. That night, my hands trembled under the white tablecloth, not from fear or age, but from restraint, because I could have ended everything right then. But I waited. Do you want to know what it feels like to be called poor by people eating steak you unknowingly paid for? It feels like swallowing acid while smiling at the waiter. It feels like watching your son wear a suit you bought with the money he stole from you. Yes, stole. I'll get to that, but first let me tell you what it means to be underestimated. I'm 72. I worked as an accountant for 45 years. Numbers have been my companions longer than people ever were. After my husband passed away, I learned to live alone with quiet dignity. I didn't take fancy vacations. I didn't wear pearls. I saved, not for luxury, but for peace. Every cent in my account represented years of double shifts, sleepless audits, and lunches eaten at my desk. I thought it was security. I thought it was love translated into numbers so that when I was gone, my son would never struggle the way I did. The message from the bank came on a rainy Thursday. Your checking balance is now $0. I thought it was a mistake. I refreshed the page. Same number, 0. I remember the taste of coffee turning bitter on my tongue. I called the bank. They told me the transfer was made by an authorized account holder, my son, Ryan, the same boy I had trusted with everything, the same boy who once cried because he didn't want me to work late. He had drained it all over $100,000, every dime. When I called him, he didn't answer. He texted instead, "Don't worry, Mom, it's for something big. You'll be proud, proud." That word stayed in my throat like a thorn. I wanted to believe him. Mothers always do, but pride doesn't empty your savings. Pride doesn't make your son ignore your calls for 3 days while your bills pile up. 3 days later, I got a call from my neighbor's daughter. "Mrs. Carter, have you seen Ryan's post?" I opened social media. There he was. My only child standing beside his glamorous wife, Monica, and her parents dressed like royalty. The caption read, "Dinner with the Henderson family, building the future." In the picture, Monica's mother was holding a champagne glass, her diamond bracelet shining like a cruel joke. And Ryan, my boy, looked like a man who had finally been accepted by the people he had always wanted to impress. That was the first night I didn't sleep. I sat in my small kitchen staring at the faded wallpaper, listening to the refrigerator hum. I thought of every lunchbox I packed, every fever I soothed, every math book I helped him with. I thought of his first job interview, how I ironed his shirt and told him confidence is free, so use it. Somewhere between that boy and this man in the picture, I had lost him. Or maybe I never really had him. The next day, I went to the bank in person. The clerk, young and polite, said, "Mrs. Carter, the transactions were authorized online using your joint account. The signatures match." My signature, forged perfectly. I wanted to laugh, but the sound that came out was closer to a choke. "Is there anything I can do?" I asked. "You could file a fraud report," he said. "But since it's a family member, it might be complicated." Complicated. That word is how the world justifies injustice. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Ryan. His voice was cheerful, like nothing had happened. "Mom, I was going to tell you, we needed to make a strong impression on Monica's parents. They're investors. It's temporary. You'll get everything back." "You used my money," I said quietly. He hesitated. Technically, it's our money. You always said it's for the family." That sentence changed something in me. It was as if a door closed inside my chest. Our money. I had worked alone, cried alone, eaten alone, and now suddenly it was ours. "Ryan," I asked, "did you even ask me before taking it?" He sighed the way children sigh when their parents are being difficult. "Mom, don't start. This is for us, for the family. Monica's father thinks I have potential. I just need to prove I can handle big investments. You'll see. Once this deal goes through, you'll never have to worry about money again." I wanted to tell him I had never worried about money. I worried about decency, about honesty, about what kind of man I had raised. But I said nothing. Silence is a weapon too. That weekend, he invited me to a dinner, a small celebration, he said. "You'll love it, Mom." I almost didn't go. But curiosity is a cruel companion. I arrived at the Henderson estate wearing my best navy dress, the one I used to wear to office parties years ago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was clean. I remember stepping into that glittering hall, every chandelier reflecting light off gold-trimmed mirrors, every laugh sharper than the sound of glass breaking. Monica greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Carter, how wonderful you could make it." Her perfume was expensive and suffocating. Behind her, her mother whispered something to her husband, and they both laughed softly. Ryan came over, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "Mom, please behave. These people are very important. Behave, as if I were a child." When we sat at the table, the insult came casually dressed as humor. Monica's father lifted his glass and said, "To family new beginnings and the wisdom of youth." Everyone laughed. Then Monica added, "And to Ryan for showing such ambition. Not everyone has the courage to take risks, especially people who grew up modestly." Her eyes flicked toward me. "You know, my mother says it takes class to build success. Money helps, of course, but class, well, that can't be bought." The table erupted in polite laughter. My son laughed too. That was the moment, the exact moment the air changed. I looked at him and saw not my child, but a stranger, a man who thought my existence was something to hide an obstacle to his new identity. I didn't say a word. I just smiled and looked down at my plate, because the moment you let them think you're weak is the moment you start to win. While the Hendersons boasted about their businesses and Monica flashed her diamond ring like a trophy, I sat there, tracing the rim of my wine glass with my finger. My silence unnerved them. Wealthy people fear silence. It reminds them that noise can't buy respect. When dessert was served, Monica leaned closer. "You must be proud, Mrs. Carter. Ryan's finally among equals." I looked up straight into her eyes and said softly, "Oh, my dear, he's sitting among investors. But not all investors are equal." She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled again. "You'll see." That was the first time I allowed myself to imagine the end of their little show. Because while they were busy decorating the world with my stolen money, I had already begun to collect the receipts. You see, being an accountant teaches you one thing: every transaction leaves a trail. And when people laugh at you long enough, you learn how to turn humiliation into strategy. That night, as the orchestra played and Monica posed for photos, I slipped my phone under the table and took a picture of the investment folder lying beside Mr. Henderson's chair. I zoomed in on the logo. I knew that company. I had worked with their books years ago. I knew their debts, their lies, and I knew exactly where to look. I left the party before dessert plates were cleared. As I walked out, I heard someone say, "Poor woman. She doesn't fit in here." I wanted to turn around and tell them, "You're right, I don't fit in with thieves," but I didn't. Not yet. That night, I sat in my car outside their mansion, staring at the lights flickering inside. My hands rested on the steering wheel. "You emptied my account to impress your in-laws," I whispered to myself. "Fine. Let's see how impressed they'll be when they learn who really owns the table." If you were me, if your own son had laughed while strangers mocked you, would you forgive him? Or would you wait quietly until the world handed you the microphone? Comment 1. If you'd forgive, hit, like if you'd do exactly what I did next. Because trust me, the night they thought they were celebrating success was the night I started planning their downfall. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The house was cold, the kind of cold that seeps through the floorboards and settles inside your bones. I made coffee the same bitter brand I'd been drinking for decades and stared at the faded curtains while the world outside slowly turned gray. It should have been an ordinary morning, quiet, predictable, but nothing about my life was ordinary anymore. There was no peace in routine when you knew your own child had robbed you. I turned on my old laptop, its screen cracked at the corner, and logged into my bank account again. The numbers were still the same. 0. I clicked through the transaction list until I found the one that had gutted me. A wire transfer dated 2 weeks ago with my son's signature at the bottom. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. The note attached said for investment entry, H Group. I didn't know then what H Group meant, but something in me whispered the name wasn't random. The phone rang, startling me. It was the bank's fraud department, a man with a calm, detached voice, as if we were discussing the weather instead of my entire life savings. Mrs. Carter, we've reviewed your request. Since your son was a joint account holder, the transaction is considered valid. Unless you can prove coercion or forgery, we can't reverse it. I wanted to scream, "Forgery! He's my son. Why would he forge my signature?" But even as I said it, I knew. Because when people start seeing you as old as disposable, they think they can write your name however they please. "I understand," I said quietly. "Please send me a copy of the authorization form." When the email arrived, I opened the attachment and felt my stomach twist. The signature looked like mine, every loop, every slant, but it wasn't. It was too perfect, too clean. I had shaky hands. My real signature always had small tremors at the edges. Whoever did this had practiced. Whoever did this knew exactly how my hand moved. I leaned back, letting the truth settle like dust. My son had forged my name. The boy I once held against my chest when he cried had turned my handwriting into a weapon. I printed the document, ran my fingers across the ink, and whispered, "So this is what family looks like." Later that day, Ryan called. His tone was brisk, confident, the kind of voice men use when they think they're in control. "Hey, Mom, I hope you're not still upset. I told you this is temporary. You'll get it all back once the deal closes." "What deal?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "The Henderson Project," he said proudly. "Monica's dad is putting together a portfolio of investors for expansion. We just needed quick liquidity to secure the buy-in. It's an opportunity, Mom. Once I'm officially part of the firm, we'll triple your money." "My money?" I asked. "Ryan, the only thing you've tripled is my disappointment." There was silence on the other end. Then his tone shifted sharp and defensive. "Don't make this a big deal, Mom. You always said you wanted me to have a better life. Well, this is it. You should be happy for me." "Happy," I repeated, almost laughing. "You emptied my account without asking. You forged my signature. You lied to me. And you expect me to be happy." He sighed, exasperated. "Mom, please don't dramatize. You've always been so cautious. Sometimes you have to take risks. Monica's family, they understand business. You don't." That sentence cut deeper than anything else. You don't understand business. I was an accountant for 45 years. I knew business better than his entire in-law family combined, but I didn't argue. I let him believe I was weak, outdated, irrelevant. Because people who underestimate you are easier to destroy. After he hung up, I sat there motionless for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a car alarm wailed. I thought of all the times I'd warned him about greed, about people who smile too much when they talk about money. But what's the use of wisdom when your own child sees you as a wallet? Around noon, I took a walk to clear my head. The sidewalks were cracked, littered with yellow leaves. Every house I passed seemed to have laughter inside families, children noise. My home had only silence. I used to believe silence was peace. Now I knew it could also be punishment. I ended up at the small park near my old office, the one where I used to eat lunch when I couldn't stand the fluorescent lights anymore. I sat on a bench watching pigeons peck at crumbs. That's when I remembered something my late husband once told me. In life and in business, Linda, never lend what you can't afford to lose, and never trust anyone who makes you feel guilty for saying no. I had broken both rules. Back home, I opened the drawer of my old filing cabinet. Inside were decades of papers, tax returns, pay stubs, pension statements. I started digging through them, looking for something I didn't even know I needed. Proof, evidence, leverage. My hands shook, but not from age, from purpose. Every document I found was a piece of armor. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with a notebook writing down dates, amounts, names. H Group, Monica Henderson, investment buy-in. My handwriting grew angrier with each line. Around midnight, I remembered an old colleague, Doris. She had retired 2 years before me after spending 30 years as the personal assistant to Mr. Henderson. If anyone knew what that family was really like, it would be her. I looked up her number in my phone and hesitated before calling. It was late, but I didn't care. She answered on the second ring. Linda Carter. Good Lord, it's been ages. Are you all right? No, I said honestly, and I think you might be the only person who can help me. There was a pause, then her voice softened. What happened? I told her everything, how Ryan had drained my account, how the Hendersons were involved, how I suspected the money was being used for something I didn't understand. Doris listened quietly, occasionally muttering under her breath. When I finished, she said, Linda, I need to show you something. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe on Birch Street. Bring nothing but yourself. And don't tell anyone you're coming. Her tone made me shiver. Why? Because she said the Hendersons aren't investors. They're debtors. And your money might be the only thing keeping them from collapse. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time replaying her words. Debtors. Collapse. The words felt heavy, dangerous. But beneath the fear, something inside me stirred a spark I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. The next morning, I took out the printed bank statement again. The transaction ID shimmered faintly under the light. I traced it with my pen and whispered to myself, You may think I'm old, you may think I'm weak, but you just made the biggest accounting error of your life. For years, I'd kept my head down, working quietly, never making waves. But numbers don't lie, and neither do mothers who've had enough. That forged signature wasn't just proof of betrayal, it was the first line in a story that wasn't over yet. They had started the game thinking I was the pawn. They were about to find out I'd always been the one keeping the books. If you discovered your child had stolen everything you worked for, would you forgive them or would you start keeping score? Comment 1 if you'd forgive Hit, like if you'd start counting every lie, because this was only the beginning. The cafe on Birch Street hadn't changed in decades. The same faded awning, the same smell of burnt espresso and vanilla syrup, the same squeaky door that had once announced every lunch break of my working years. I used to come here with Doris after long audits, 2 women in pencil skirts and tired heels sharing black coffee and quiet victories. This morning, though, there was nothing comforting about it. My heart pounded as I walked in, scanning the tables, until I saw her gray hair pulled neatly into a bun, reading glasses perched at the tip of her nose, a folder beside her cup. Doris hadn't aged. She'd solidified like marble that refused to crack. Linda, she said softly when I approached, sit down before you fall down. You look like you've seen a ghost. I think I have, I said, forcing a smile. And his name is my son. She studied my face for a moment, then pushed the folder toward me. I didn't want to believe it either when I first looked into it. But it's worse than you think. Your boy's not just mixed up with them, he's being used. I hesitated, my fingers resting on the folder's edge. Used how? Open it. Inside were printed emails, scanned contracts, and a spreadsheet filled with numbers. It looked like my past life had returned in paper form. These are Henderson Group's internal statements, Doris said, leaked from an employee who still owes me a favor. Look at the liabilities. I skimmed the first few lines and froze. Their debt was massive millions in unpaid taxes, unreported losses, and pending lawsuits. They're broke, I whispered. Beyond broke, she said. And they're hiding it by bringing in outside money under the label of private investment. It's a shell game, Linda. They take cash from people like you call it a partnership, then use it to pay off old debts while promising profits that will never come. When it all collapses, the small investors take the fall. And because your son's name is on the paperwork, you'll go down with him. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. I recognized my own signature again, perfect, clean fake. They forged it, I murmured. Of course they did, Doris said. Ryan probably thinks he's a partner, but to the Hendersons, he's just a scapegoat with an old mother who happens to have savings. They'll use your name, your credibility, and when the time comes, they'll dump all responsibility on you. both. You'll lose your money, your reputation, and possibly your home. The room seemed to tilt slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. He doesn't know. He truly believes he's helping them. God, he's too blind to see he's their pawn. Doris nodded slowly. That's what greed does. It blinds good people. I watched Mr. Henderson do this for years, lure investors with champagne and smiles. He's a vulture dressed in silk. I stared out the window for a moment. A delivery truck rumbled past. People walked, their dogs carried groceries, lived ordinary lives. And my son thinks being accepted by them means he's made it. Doris reached across the table and touched my hand. You can't save him from the hole he's digging, but you can make sure he doesn't bury you with him. I looked back at the folder. Numbers, contracts, lies, all things I understood better than people. My brain started to work again the way it used to when I was solving fraud cases for clients who swore their books were clean. I began noticing patterns, duplicate transactions, backdated entries, a fake invoice trail leading to an offshore account. They're laundering, I said quietly. Doris smiled grimly. Exactly. And guess whose name is on 2 of those invoices? I didn't have to look. I already knew. Mine. She nodded. You've got to act fast. File a preliminary complaint. Freeze the assets under your name before they move them again. I have a friend in the district attorney's office. He's discreet. He can help, but you'll need evidence. I felt the old strength returning, the one I thought had died with my husband. Evidence is what I do best. Doris leaned back, studying me. Linda, this isn't just about numbers. Once you start digging, they'll know, and the Hendersons don't take kindly to people exposing them. I took a slow sip of coffee. It was bitter just the way I liked it. They underestimated me once. That was their first mistake. If they try again, it'll be their last. She chuckled, shaking her head. You always were the quiet one with the sharpest mind in the room. I should have known you'd turn this into an audit. Not an audit, I said, a reckoning. For the next hour, Doris walked me through the details, the Hendersons' dummy corporations, the offshore transfers, the fake tax filings. Each page was a confession in ink. I scanned the data like a surgeon dissecting every number, every line. There was enough here to bury them. But beneath the satisfaction, grief simmered. This wasn't just business. It was my son's face on those documents. His name beside mine tied to crimes he didn't understand. He had traded his conscience for belonging. When we finished, Doris handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here. Use it wisely. And Linda, don't warn him. If you do, he'll tip them off. I slipped it into my purse. I won't. As I stood to leave, she said, You're walking into a storm. But I think you've been in storms all your life, haven't you? I smiled faintly. This time I'm bringing lightning. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and city dust. I walked slowly, the weight of the flash drive heavy in my bag, the weight of betrayal heavier still. Every step felt deliberate, measured, like I was walking back into the life I'd left behind. At home, I cleared the dining table and spread out the documents. My house was quiet except for the ticking clock and the steady rhythm of my heart. I labeled files, created timelines, and connected transactions with colored pens. The more I saw, the more I understood this wasn't random greed. It was architecture, an elaborate structure built on deception, with my son standing proudly on its crumbling roof. By midnight, I had a clear map of their fraud, and yet exhaustion didn't come. Something colder did, clarity. I stared at Ryan's picture on the mantel. It was taken when he was 12, holding a trophy from his first science fair. He had written, "To Mom, my inspiration," on the back. I picked it up, tracing the words with my thumb. "You used to be proud of honesty," I whispered. "Now you're proud of thieves." My phone buzzed. A message from Monica. Dinner tomorrow night at the Henderson residence. Formal attire, 7 p.m. I almost laughed. Formal attire, as if clothes could hide corruption. I typed back one word, confirmed. Then I turned off the lights and let the room fall into darkness. The papers on the table glowed faintly under the streetlight, a battlefield waiting for morning. Before going to bed, I wrote a single line in my notebook. They took my money to impress the world. I'll take their world to remind them who paid for it. If someone you loved was being used by people who only saw your worth in dollars, would you save them or teach them the cost of betrayal? Comment 1 if you'd still protect them, like if you'd make them face what they created. Because this was no longer about money. This was about dignity, and I wasn't done counting. The night of the Henderson dinner felt like stepping into someone else's dream, the kind where everything sparkles until you realize it's made of glass. The mansion sat at the top of a hill, light spilling from every window like molten gold. Cars lined the driveway, sleek foreign machines that looked allergic to dust. I arrived in my 10-year-old sedan, its engine hiccuping as if embarrassed to be there. The valet gave me a polite but puzzled smile, the kind people reserve for someone they assume is lost. "Mrs. Carter?" he asked carefully. "Yes," I said, handing over the keys. "Don't scratch it. It's the only honest thing parked here tonight." Inside, the house gleamed. Chandeliers dangled like crowns, the marble floor polished to a mirror. Waiters in black and white glided between guests carrying trays of champagne. I stood near the entrance for a moment, letting the music and laughter crash over me. They didn't notice me at first, and I watched them. Monica's parents moving through the crowd with performative grace. Ryan laughing too loudly at something. Mr. Henderson said Monica herself posing for a photographer with a glass of wine tilted just so. My son looked comfortable there. Too comfortable. When Monica finally spotted me, her expression flickered surprise, then something colder. She approached with a smile that could cut glass. "Mrs. Carter," she said, "you made it. I wasn't sure you'd feel comfortable at events like this." "I wouldn't miss it," I replied, matching her smile with one of my own. "After all, my money helped build this evening." Her smile faltered just for a second, then she laughed, airy and false. "Oh, you're so funny. Come, everyone's eager to meet Ryan's mother." She led me through the crowd, introducing me as if I were a curiosity. "This is Linda Carter," she said to a cluster of guests. "Ryan's mother. She used to work in accounting." The way she said "used to" was a dagger wrapped in silk. I nodded politely, accepting their limp handshakes and condescending smiles. Ryan appeared beside me, flushed with pride and nervous energy. "Mom, you look great." His voice cracked slightly as if trying to bridge two worlds that refused to touch. "I thought I'd come see what my life savings bought," I said softly. He laughed, missing the blade hidden in the words. The dinner began in the grand dining room long enough to seat 20. At the head sat Mr. Henderson, his wife beside him, radiating the smug satisfaction of people who mistake wealth for virtue. Ryan and Monica took their seats near the center, surrounded by investors and friends of the family. I was placed near the far end between an elderly banker who smelled of cigars and a woman who spoke only about cosmetic surgery. The meal unfolded like theater. Polite laughter rehearsed compliments, glasses clinking in choreographed rhythm. Every word at that table was currency, every smile a transaction. When the conversation turned to investments, Mr. Henderson raised his glass and said, "To the visionaries who know how to turn opportunity into legacy." Everyone toasted. Monica leaned toward her mother and whispered something that made them both laugh. "What's funny?" I asked quietly. Monica turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, nothing, Mrs. Carter. We were just talking about how fortunate Ryan is. Not everyone gets to marry into certain circles. It takes class to navigate success, don't you think?" I met her eyes. "Class isn't inherited, dear. It's revealed." She blinked, unsure if she'd been insulted. Ryan stepped in quickly. "Mom, can we not?" "Of course," I said, sipping my water. "Wouldn't want to ruin the performance." For a moment, silence rippled across the table. Then conversation resumed louder than before, as if to drown out what had just happened. I watched Ryan's face tighten, his jaw twitching. He was embarrassed not by what he'd done, but by me. Later, as dessert was served, small golden cakes that tasted like sugar and emptiness, Mr. Henderson stood to give a speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice booming tonight, "we celebrate the future. Henderson Group is expanding, and it wouldn't be possible without new investors who believe in our vision. Families like ours grow stronger when we share success." To the Carters, applause filled the room. Ryan beamed. Monica clapped delicately. I sat perfectly still. The word success echoed in my head like an insult. Success built on stolen money, success carved out of trust. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled and raised my glass. "To transparency," I said softly. No one noticed. After the speech, guests mingled again, voices rising with the champagne. I wandered toward the side hallway, needing air. My heels clicked on marble as I passed a line of family portraits, Henderson men staring down with identical expressions of entitlement. Halfway down the corridor, I spotted an open door leading to a small study. Inside, Mr. Henderson's briefcase rested on a desk. The folder from the Cafe H Group investments peeked out. I glanced around. No one was watching. I stepped inside. My hands didn't shake as I pulled out my phone and snapped photos of every document I could see. Invoices, contracts, bank transfers. My heart raced, but my mind was steady. Each flash of the camera felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When I finished, I closed the briefcase exactly as I'd found it and left the room. Back in the dining area, Ryan caught me returning and frowned. "Where were you?" Looking for the restroom, I lied smoothly. "This house is bigger than it needs to be." He chuckled awkwardly. "You just don't like fancy places." "Fancy," I said, smiling. "No, son. I don't like dishonest ones." Before he could reply, Monica joined us, looping her arm through his. Ryan were taking pictures by the piano. "Come on." She looked at me. "You can join us too, Mrs. Carter, if you like." "Thank you," I said, "but I prefer to remember this evening exactly as it is without filters." Her smile cracked for half a second, then she turned away. The rest of the night blurred into a haze of laughter and hollow congratulations. I stayed until the very end, long enough to see Ryan shake hands with men twice his age, pretending to be one of them. Long enough to watch Monica kiss her father on the cheek and whisper something that made him laugh. I caught the words as I passed. "She's harmless. Harmless." I carried that word home with me like a shard of glass in my pocket. The moment I closed my front door, the facade cracked. I kicked off my shoes and sank into the armchair, the one my husband used to read in. The silence was deafening. I took out my phone, scrolling through the pictures I'd taken in the study. Each image glowed with quiet power. The forged documents, the fake accounts, the paper trail of greed. They thought I was a relic, a burden. They forgot I was a bookkeeper. And I had just balanced their books. But as the adrenaline faded, grief returned. I looked at the photos and saw my son's name stamped on nearly every page. He wasn't just a victim. He had signed himself into their corruption. Whether he knew it or not, he was complicit. I pressed the phone against my chest, whispering his name. "Ryan, what did they turn you into?" The next morning, I found an envelope under my door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an invitation to a gala announcing Henderson Group's new partnership. At the bottom was Ryan's name listed as a junior partner. My throat tightened. They weren't just using him, they were branding him. For the first time in years, I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a mother. I saw a survivor, wrinkles like battle scars, eyes sharper than I remembered. The reflection didn't ask for pity. It asked for justice. That day I called Doris. "I have the evidence," I told her, "and I know how to use it." She paused. "You're not going to the police yet, are you?" "Not yet," I said. "First I'm going to let them finish building their illusion. Then I'll pull the curtain." Silence hung between us for a moment before she said, "Be careful, Linda. They'll come for you once they know." I smiled faintly. "Then I'll make sure they never see me coming." That evening, I took the photos from my phone, printed them, and filed them into a red binder. On the cover, I wrote one word: balance. Because that's what this was, balancing the scales. Not revenge, just accounting. I placed the binder on my table and stared at it until the sun went down. The house grew dark, but I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to see the room to know I wasn't alone. The ghosts of every sacrifice I'd ever made sat with me. The long nights, the double shifts, the birthday dinners I'd missed so Ryan could have a better life, all of them surrounded me, whispering the same thing. "You've been silent long enough." So I whispered back, "You're right." That night I didn't sleep. I planned. If you were me, sitting alone with proof that your own family had turned your life into their ladder, would you forgive, or would you pull it out from under them? Comment 1, if you'd still protect them. Like if you'd finally let them fall. Because this wasn't humiliation anymore. It was strategy. And I was done being harmless. 2 days after the Henderson dinner, the doorbell rang just as I was finishing my morning coffee. The cup rattled against the saucer when I set it down. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Ryan's car parked out front, shiny new, and far too expensive for someone who'd only just become a junior partner. I opened the door, and there he was, smiling, that anxious smile I used to love the one he wore as a boy when he'd broken something and wanted me to pretend it wasn't his fault. "Morning, Mom," he said, holding a folder under his arm. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. He walked in like he owned the place, his eyes skimming the living room as if checking for signs of poverty. He didn't notice the red binder on the table. "You look tired," I said. "Busy," he corrected, dropping the act of the caring son almost immediately. "The company's growing fast. A lot of paperwork, a lot of responsibility." "I'll bet." He sat down and opened the folder. "Speaking of which, I need you to sign something. Just a formality, legal stuff. To clean up the paperwork from the initial investment." I didn't move. Paperwork. "Yeah," he said, avoiding my eyes. "It's just to confirm you're aware of the transactions that were made through your account. Monica's dad's lawyers suggested we make it official for auditing purposes." I stared at him for a long moment. "You mean for protection?" He blinked. "What?" "For theirs, not yours." His smile froze. "Mom, please, don't start. This isn't a trap. It's just—" "Ryan, I interrupted. You forged my signature once. You stole my money, and now you're standing in my house asking me to legalize it." He sighed and rubbed his temples, his voice taking on the tone of someone speaking to a stubborn child. "You're overreacting. You don't understand how these things work. Monica's father knows what he's doing. He's protecting the family." "Whose family?" I asked quietly. "Ours," he said quickly, but the hesitation in his voice betrayed him. "Mom, please, if you don't sign, it's going to look suspicious. We could both get into trouble." I looked at the folder. The paper inside was crisp, the ink fresh. I picked it up and read the first few lines. It wasn't an acknowledgement form, it was a liability release. If I signed it, every fraudulent transaction tied to my name would become legally valid. They were trying to erase me as a victim to turn me into an accomplice. I set the folder down gently. "You think you're saving yourself, but you're not. You're burying yourself alive." He stood up, agitated. "Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just business." "No, Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "It's betrayal. There's a difference." He exhaled sharply, anger flickering in his eyes. "You always do this. You make everything about morals and feelings. This is why you never got ahead. The world doesn't reward honesty, Mom. It rewards power." I wanted to slap him. Not out of rage, but out of heartbreak. "You think stealing from your mother makes you powerful?" He laughed bitterly. "You wouldn't understand. You've never been ambitious. You've spent your whole life behind a desk counting other people's money. I'm doing this for us." "For us," I repeated, my voice trembling now, "or for them?" He looked away. That was my answer. The silence that followed felt like the end of something sacred. He finally pushed the folder toward me. "Please, just sign it. Monica's father said it'll all be settled once this is done." I stared at the pen lying beside the paper. My name was printed at the bottom, waiting for the last act of surrender. My hand hovered over it, and for a moment I felt weak. I thought of all the times I had defended him even when he didn't deserve it. Of the years I'd worked late nights so he could go to college. Of the ring I'd pawned to pay his tuition. And now, here he was, my life's investment, asking for one final deposit, my dignity. I picked up the pen. Ryan's shoulders relaxed, relieved. "Thank you, Mom. You're doing the right thing." I signed my name slowly, deliberately. Then I flipped the page and kept signing page after page. His relief turned into confusion. "Mom, there's only one signature required." I smiled faintly. "I know, but sometimes it takes more than one to make it real." He frowned, unsure whether I was mocking him. I slid the folder back across the table. "There, it's done." He grabbed it quickly, stuffing it into his briefcase. "You won't regret this," he said, avoiding my gaze. "I already do." When he left, I watched his car drive away until it disappeared at the corner. Only then did I open the drawer beneath the table and pull out another folder. The real one. The paper I'd signed wasn't the release form. It was a copy I had prepared myself, an old trick I'd learned from years of auditing manipulative clients. I had signed a fake document with invisible ink, my name vanishing within minutes. I sat there letting the silence return. My body shook not from fear this time, but from the weight of clarity. I realized something cruelly simple. I was alone. My son was gone, even if his body still existed somewhere out there wearing a suit and calling himself a man. The grief came suddenly violent and raw. I pressed my hands to my face and cried. Not quietly, not gracefully, ugly, gasping sobs that tore through me. I cried for the boy who used to pick dandelions for me on the way home from school, for the man who had forgotten who he came from, for the mother who had given everything and was left with nothing but a forged signature and an empty bank account. When the tears finally stopped, the room felt different. Still, but not lifeless. The pain had burned something away, leaving only what was necessary. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and studied myself. My eyes were swollen, my cheeks streaked with tears, but there was something new, their steel. The woman staring back at me wasn't broken. She was stripped down to truth. That night I sat at my desk with the lamp casting a soft circle of light over the red binder. I opened it and began to organize everything: the forged signatures, the fake contracts, the photos I'd taken from Mr. Henderson's study. Each document found its place, every piece fitting into a puzzle I was finally ready to solve. At one point, I stopped and whispered to the empty room, "You think I signed your papers, Ryan? I've been signing your sentence." It was past midnight when I closed the binder. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes. I didn't flinch. I was done hiding from storms. The next morning, Monica showed up unannounced, her perfume arriving before she did. She stood at my door wearing designer sunglasses and a smirk. "Mrs. Carter, I just wanted to thank you for helping Ryan. You have no idea how much this means to us." I held the door halfway open. "Actually," I said, "I think I do." She laughed lightly. "You know, for someone your age, you've got such a dramatic way of looking at things. It's all just business." "Then you won't mind," I said, "if I treat it like business, too." Her smile wavered. "What do you mean?" "Every transaction leaves a record," I said, "and every record has a reckoning." She frowned, stepping back. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said, shutting the door. "It's a forecast." When she was gone, I exhaled slowly. The house felt lighter, emptier, but in a good way, like a wound finally cleaned. I turned to the table where the red binder waited. I ran my fingers over the cover and whispered, "It's time." If your child asked you to sign away your dignity in the name of family, would you do it? Or would you let the ink dry on their betrayal and turn it into justice? Comment 1, if you'd forgive. Like if you'd let them learn what honesty costs. Because that day, I stopped being a mother who lost everything. I became the woman who was about to take it all back. I used to believe the hardest part of betrayal was the moment you discovered it. But it isn't. The hardest part is what comes after the silence, the disbelief, the ache of realizing you were never blind, just hopeful. Hope is the cruelest currency. It keeps you investing in people who have already gone bankrupt. By the time I met Ethan, I had none of it left. He was waiting for me in a small law office downtown. Nothing fancy, no marble floors, no glass walls, just dusty books, an old ceiling fan, and the smell of ink and paper. Doris sat beside him, sipping tea like she'd been there 1,000 times. "Linda," she said as I walked in, "this is Ethan. Don't let the baby face fool you. He's sharp." Ethan stood and offered his hand. He couldn't have been more than 30, but his eyes were older eyes that had seen too much too soon. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "Doris told me everything. I'm sorry you're going through this." "Don't be," I replied, taking a seat. "I'm not here for sympathy. I'm here for strategy." He smiled faintly. "Good. Because what you're about to do will take more than anger. It'll take precision." He laid out a file on the desk. Inside were printouts of my bank transactions, the forged documents, and the copies I'd taken from Mr. Henderson's study. "This is enough to open an investigation," he said. "We can file under financial elder abuse and fraudulent misappropriation. Once the claim is in, we can request a temporary freeze of all assets associated with your name and any entity tied to Henderson Group." "Freeze them?" I asked. "Even the company accounts." "Especially the company accounts," he said. "If the judge signs off, they won't be able to move a single dollar until the audit is complete." I nodded slowly. "That will ruin them." He looked me in the eye. "That's justice, Mrs. Carter. You've already been ruined." Doris leaned forward. "There's more. If you act fast, you can use the same clause they used against you, the joint responsibility clause. They forged your consent, but we'll turn that back on them. You'll be the claimant, not the defendant." For a long time, I didn't speak. The weight of it pressed down on me, not the revenge, but the righteousness of it. "And Ryan," I asked finally. "He's tangled in all of this." Ethan hesitated. "If he signed anything knowingly, he'll be held accountable too. I can try to separate him from the Hendersons in the filing, but—" "I don't want special treatment," I said, cutting him off. "If he did this willingly, he needs to face it." Doris touched my arm. "Linda, are you sure he's your son?" "No," I said, "he used to be." Ethan slid a pen toward me. "Then let's begin." I signed the forms without trembling. Every stroke of the pen felt like reclaiming something they'd taken from me. Power doesn't come from anger, it comes from clarity. And for the first time in months, my mind was razor sharp. Ethan explained the next steps the filing would go through the state's Financial Crimes Division. The assets would be temporarily frozen within 72 hours, and a private investigator would serve notice to the Hendersons' office. When they find out, he said they'll panic. Expect calls, threats, maybe even visits. "Let them come," I said. "I've been ignored long enough. It's time they learn to listen." We finished the paperwork. As I stood to leave, Ethan handed me his card. "If you get scared, call me," he said. "I don't do scared anymore," I replied. Outside, the afternoon sun felt different, brighter, somehow cleaner. I walked slowly down the steps of the courthouse, the sound of traffic humming like applause. For months, I'd been the quiet one in the corner, the invisible mother at the dinner table. But now, invisibility had turned into armor. People can't attack what they can't see coming. That evening, I went home and waited. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. I made tea, watered my plants, read a few pages of an old mystery novel, anything to keep my hands busy. But inside, I was still, focused. I knew that somewhere across town, the Hendersons were about to discover what it felt like to have everything they touched suddenly turn to ice. It began the next morning. My phone buzzed before sunrise. Unknown number, I answered. "Mother, what did you do?" Ryan's voice cracked like a whip through the receiver. "I told the truth," I said. "You froze our accounts," he shouted. "The company, Monica's father, everyone's losing their minds. They said the court order came through last night. Do you realize what you've done?" "I do," I said calmly. "You emptied my life to impress people who would have discarded you the moment the money ran out. So I returned the favor." "You don't understand," he said, his voice rising. "They're threatening to cut me out, to sue me. They're saying I dragged them into legal trouble. You're destroying everything." I let a moment of silence stretch before I replied. Everything I said quietly. "No, Ryan, I'm just cleaning up the books." "Mom, please," he said, desperation creeping in now. "You can fix this. You can tell them it was a misunderstanding." "It wasn't," I said. "It was theft. Fraud, betrayal. I just happened to have the receipts." He cursed under his breath. "You're going to regret this." "I already did," I said, and hung up. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I poured another cup of tea and looked out the window. The world looked exactly the same, quiet street gray sky children on their way to school, but everything had changed. Somewhere across the city, the Hendersons were watching their empire crumble, and my son was learning what real consequences felt like. Later that afternoon, Doris called. "It's done," she said. "The investigation is officially open. Ethan says the DA's office is impressed. You gave them everything they need." I smiled faintly. Numbers don't lie. She hesitated. "Linda, are you sure you're ready for what comes next? This will get messy. They'll fight back." "I'm counting on it," I said. "Let them make noise. I've spent my whole life being quiet. It's their turn to squirm." After the call, I opened my red binder again. The evidence sat there precise and undeniable. I added a new section labeled Phase 2. It contained a copy of the company's latest press release and announcement of their upcoming gala to celebrate the expansion of Henderson Group. They had no idea their assets were frozen. They were throwing a party for a company that no longer existed. The irony was almost poetic. That night, I drove to the edge of town where the city lights faded into dark fields. I parked the car and sat in silence, watching the horizon. My husband used to bring me here when life felt too loud. "Perspective," he'd say, pointing to the endless stretch of land. "All of this looks different from a distance." He was right. From where I sat, the city looked small, its greed, its noise, its arrogance, all tiny flickers of light against the vast dark. I thought of Ryan again. I tried to summon the motherly guilt I used to feel whenever I disciplined him as a child, but it didn't come. What I felt instead was something steadier, purer. Justice. Before driving home, I whispered into the night, "This isn't revenge, it's balance." The wind carried it away like a promise. The next morning, Ethan called. "They filed a motion to unfreeze the accounts," he said, "but the court denied it. You've got them cornered." I closed my eyes, letting the words sink in. Cornered. For so long, I had been the one trapped. Now the walls had shifted. "Good," I said. "Let them taste what confinement feels like." He hesitated. "Mrs. Carter, if I may, most people in your position just want their money back. You seem calm, almost surgical." I laughed softly. "That's because I've spent my life balancing ledgers. This isn't rage, Ethan. It's reconciliation." That evening, Ryan came again. This time he didn't knock. He burst through the door, eyes wild. "They're done with me," he shouted. "Monica's family kicked me out. They said I ruined everything. I have nothing left, Mom. Nothing." I looked at him, the tailored suit wrinkled, the arrogance stripped away his voice, shaking like a frightened child's. "Now you know what it feels like," I said quietly. "You don't understand," he pleaded. "I did this for you, for us." "No, Ryan," I said, standing. "You did it for approval. You traded integrity for applause." And now the clapping stopped. He sank onto the couch, covering his face with his hands. "They're saying you'll press charges. Please don't. I'll fix it, I swear. Just tell them to stop." I walked to the window, staring at the street. "The law doesn't take orders from me anymore. It listens to evidence." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "You're really gonna let them destroy me?" I turned to him. "No, son. You destroyed yourself the moment you decided your mother's dignity was disposable." For a long time, he didn't move. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." I wanted to believe him, but some apologies are just echoes of the lies that caused them. I nodded slowly. "Keep that word. You'll need it where you're going." He left without another word, the door slamming behind him. The sound didn't hurt. It felt final. When the house fell silent again, I sat in my chair and let the weight of everything settle. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was awake, fully, finally awake. Outside, the wind had died down. The air was still. It was the kind of stillness that comes before a storm. I smiled because this time I wasn't afraid of storms. I was the one bringing it. If someone took everything from you and called it ambition, would you wait for them to come to their senses? Or would you teach them the cost of underestimating you? Comment 1 if you'd forgive, like if you'd call it what it is, justice. Because that night, for the first time, I slept without fear and the storm began to move. It had been 3 days since Ryan's last visit. 3 days of silence, of waiting, of the kind of stillness that doesn't mean peace. Just pressure building beneath the floorboards. I knew he would come back. The desperate always do. When people lose the power they stole, they crawl back to the place they took it, from hoping the source still loves them. It was nearly sunset when he arrived. I didn't need to look out the window to know. I heard the tires screeching before the engine even stopped. A heartbeat later, fists hammered against my door. "Open up, Mom. Please open the damn door." I didn't rush. I folded my reading glasses, set them carefully on the table beside the red binder, and took my time crossing the room. When I opened the door, the fading light caught his face. Unshaven eyes, bloodshot suit, wrinkled. The proud man from the Henderson dinners was gone. What stood before me was a boy, again terrified, humiliated, cornered. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. "They're going to destroy me," he said, pacing like a trapped animal. "You have to stop this, please." I closed the door. "Good evening to you, too." "Mom, this isn't the time for sarcasm," he snapped. "You don't understand what's happening. The Hendersons filed for bankruptcy this morning. The investigators are coming after everyone involved, including me. You have to withdraw your complaint before it's too late." "I can't," I said calmly, "and I won't." He froze. "What do you mean you won't? You're my mother." I met his eyes. That used to mean something. He groaned, dragging a hand through his hair. "You don't get it. They're turning on me. Monica left. I can't reach her. Her parents won't take my calls. They told the lawyers I was the one who forged everything. They're saying I manipulated you. I'll go to prison, Mom." "Prison?" He was shaking now, his voice cracking between anger and panic. I watched him unravel piece by piece. I should have felt pity, but all I felt was a deep, sorrowful calm. "You forged my signature?" I said softly. He stopped pacing. "I didn't mean to." "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "You meant to when you practiced my handwriting on those checks years ago, when you learned how to imitate my loops and slants. You meant to when you told yourself I'd understand. Every lie starts with a decision." He swallowed hard. "I didn't know they'd use me, I swear. They promised this was legal. Monica's father said." "Monica's father said exactly what you wanted to hear," I said. "That you deserved more, that you were smarter than the rest of us, that success would finally make you worth something." I stepped closer. "Tell me, Ryan, did it?" He looked at me like a man staring down the truth for the first time. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he whispered. "No," I said. "You thought you were doing the easy thing." He flinched like I'd struck him. The silence between us stretched thin. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane. "Mom, please," he said finally. "I'll pay you back. I'll fix it somehow." "You can't," I said. "You don't have anything left to give. Not money, not trust, not even honesty." He turned away, gripping the back of a chair. "You don't know what it's like always being looked down on, never having enough, trying to prove yourself to people who only respect power." "I know exactly what that's like," I said quietly. "I lived it, but I never traded my soul for it." He turned back to me, his face twisted in frustration. "You think you're better than me because you're poor and proud. That's not virtue. Mom, that's bitterness." For the first time, my voice rose. "No, Ryan, that's survival. I walked through life with nothing but my name, and I kept it clean. You had everything I never did. A good education, opportunity, choices, and you used them to steal from the one person who would have given you anything if you had just asked." He stood there breathing hard, eyes wet. Then his voice broke. "I didn't think you'd ever find out." That more than anything made me laugh. A small broken sound that didn't feel like laughter at all. "Of course you didn't, because you forgot who I am." I walked to the table and picked up the red binder. "Do you know what this is?" He stared at it like it might explode. "Evidence," he said weakly. I nodded. "Every transaction, every forged signature, every file I found in Henderson's study. You left a trail wide enough for a blind man to follow." I placed the binder on the table and tapped it gently. "You built your tower of lies with my name carved into every brick, and now it's collapsing." He took a hesitant step toward me. "Mom, please. I'll confess. I'll tell the police it was me. Just please don't send me to jail." I looked at him for a long moment, long enough for the air to grow heavy. "You think this is about jail," I said. "This is about dignity. Mine. Yours. The kind you can't buy back once you've sold it." He dropped to his knees in front of me, hands clasped. "I'm begging you," he said, his voice cracking. "I can't lose everything." I felt something twist inside me. He had knelt like this once before when he was 7 and had broken my favorite teacup, crying, "Please don't be mad, Mommy." Back then, I'd pulled him into my arms and told him love was bigger than mistakes. Now, looking down at the man he had become, I realized I'd been wrong. Love isn't bigger than mistakes. It's buried by them. I sank into the chair beside him, the red binder between us, Ryan. I said softly, "Do you know what the saddest part is? It's not the money, it's that I raised you to know better. You didn't just steal my savings, you stole my faith in you." Tears streamed down his face. "Then teach me how to fix it. Please, tell me what to do." I took a deep breath. "You can start by telling the truth. Not to me, to yourself. You wanted power and you used my name to get it. You wanted to be someone else's son instead of mine. You traded your family for their approval, and now you'll live with what you bought." He wiped his eyes, his voice barely audible. "You really hate me." I shook my head. "I don't hate you. Hate is active. It needs energy. What I feel now is nothing. And that's worse." For a moment, he just knelt there, silent, shaking. Then he whispered, "You're not the mother I remember." I leaned back. "No, I'm not. She died the day you forged her name." He stood up slowly, staring down at me. "You won't forgive me." "I will," I said, surprising him. "But not today. Forgiveness without consequence is permission, and I'm done permitting things that destroy me." He took a step toward me, anger flickering again. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? You think this makes you strong." "No," I said, "it makes me honest." He stared at me for a long time, his face twisted between shame and resentment. Then, without another word, he turned and left. The door slammed hard enough to shake the frame. I stayed seated, listening to the echo fade. The sun had almost set, filling the room with orange light. Dust particles floated in the air like ghosts, glowing for a moment before vanishing. I looked at the red binder still resting on the table. My reflection shimmered faintly in its glossy cover, an old woman, tired but unbroken. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. I thought of every woman I'd ever known who had been silenced in the name of family, who had swallowed their pain because he's my son, he's my husband, he's my blood. I wondered if they ever realized that blood means nothing if it's used to drain you dry. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Doris. Ethan says the investigation's gone public. Tomorrow's papers will cover the Henderson scandal. You did it, Linda. I stared at the message for a long time. Did it feel like victory? Maybe, but it also felt like loss. Because justice always costs something, and mine had cost me my child. Still, when I finally rose from the chair and turned off the lamp, I whispered to the darkness, "So be it." If you had to choose between saving your child and saving your soul, which one would you choose? Comment 1 if you'd still protect them, like if you'd protect yourself instead. Because tonight, I didn't just stand up to my son, I buried the woman who once believed silence was love. They called it the Gala of Renewal. Gold banners, champagne fountains, a live orchestra, a celebration for an empire already rotting from the inside. The Hendersons had no idea that the very ground beneath their marble floor had already cracked, and I, the old woman they called poor, was coming to finish what I started. I arrived alone, no chauffeur, no jewelry, no smile, just a gray dress, a small clutch, and the quiet authority of someone who no longer needed to prove anything. The valet tried to take my coat, but I shook my head. "I won't be staying long," I said. Inside, the ballroom shimmered under 1,000 crystals. Cameras, flash, laughter echoed, and the smell of expensive perfume clung to the air like deceit. I saw Monica first standing by the champagne tower wearing a gown that could pay my rent for a year. Her laughter was brittle, forced the kind that cracks when you press it. She didn't see me. None of them did. Until I wanted them to. I walked to the center of the room, my heels clicking against the marble like a metronome counting down. At the front, Mr. Henderson stood at a podium, addressing a crowd of investors and journalists. Tonight, he announced marks a new beginning for Henderson Group, a partnership built on trust, growth, and integrity. The irony almost made me laugh. His speech went on, numbers, promises, buzzwords, all smoke and mirrors, and then as applause filled the room, I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I couldn't agree more. The room fell silent. Heads turned. Cameras swung toward me like spotlights. The music died mid-note. Henderson blinked his polished smile, faltering. "Mrs. Carter," he said, forcing warmth into his voice. "What a surprise. We weren't expecting." "No," I said, "you weren't." Monica's face drained of color. She whispered something to her mother, who immediately grabbed her husband's arm. Ryan, standing near the stage, looked frozen, pale, trembling. The mask had finally cracked. I walked up to the microphone. "You're right, Mr. Henderson. Tonight is about integrity. It's about truth." A nervous laugh rippled through the room. I set my clutch on the podium, unzipped it, and pulled out the red binder. The same binder that had sat on my kitchen table for months. "This," I said, tapping it, "is the real partnership agreement. The one built on lies, forged signatures, and stolen money." Someone gasped. A camera flash burst. Mr. Henderson straightened, trying to regain control. "Mrs. Carter, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it is," I interrupted. "You wanted an audience, you got one." I opened the binder, flipping to the first page. Here's the document where my name was forged to authorize a transfer of $120,000, my life savings. Here's the trail of shell companies your accountants used to hide the money. And here, I held up a paper so the cameras could catch it, is the court order freezing every one of your accounts effective 48 hours ago. Chaos erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Investors pulled out their phones. Henderson's composure cracked. He turned to his wife, whispering frantically. Monica grabbed Ryan's arm. "Do something," she hissed. Ryan just stood there. I continued, my voice steady. For months, this family pretended to represent success. But what they built wasn't success. It was theft wrapped in luxury. Monica's mother stepped forward, her tone dripping venom. "How dare you come here and accuse us like what I asked? Some old woman who doesn't know her place." "You're right, I didn't. That was your mistake," the crowd murmured. I turned to Ryan. "Tell them, son. Tell them whose money built this company." He looked at me, his lips trembling. "Mom, please stop." "Tell them," I demanded, my voice echoing through the hall. His silence was answer enough. "Then I will," I said. "It was mine, every dollar. I earned it cleaning offices, balancing ledgers, working nights, while he slept under a roof I paid for. I built a future for him, and he sold it to people who thought dignity could be bought." Reporters swarmed closer, microphones thrust forward. Henderson's security guards hesitated, unsure if they should intervene. "You forged my name, Mr. Henderson," I said, turning back to him. "But you forgot that names have weight, and mine carries proof." I pulled out one final sheet, the notarized document Ethan had filed days earlier. "As of this morning," I said, holding it high, "Henderson Group is no longer yours. The state has transferred all frozen assets into custodial receivership under my legal guardianship pending investigation. Congratulations, gentlemen. You now work for me." Gasps, whispers. A single champagne glass shattered somewhere near the back of the room. Ryan looked like he'd been punched. Monica's lipstick trembled on her lips. Henderson's wife went pale as marble. The old man himself leaned on the podium, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "I told you," I said, lowering my voice. "You can't build a kingdom on stolen ground. The earth always remembers." For a long moment, no one moved. Then quietly, I gathered the papers, closed the binder, and turned to leave. But behind me, Ryan's voice cracked through the silence. "Mom, wait." I stopped. Slowly, I turned back. He stood there, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know it would go this far. I didn't mean for it to. You didn't mean for it to what I asked. To hurt me, to ruin me, or to get caught." He stepped closer, his voice trembling. "I was wrong. All of it. I see that now. Please, don't do this in front of them. Don't humiliate me." I met his gaze and felt the weight of every sleepless night, every unpaid debt of love, every silent tear I'd hidden. "Humiliation," I said softly. "You think this is humiliation? Humiliation is sitting at a table you paid for while people laugh at you for being beneath them. Humiliation is hearing your son call you old-fashioned because you believe in honesty. This is justice." He broke down then, right there in front of everyone. Monica turned away disgusted. Henderson tried to walk off stage, but the reporters followed him like sharks. The orchestra had stopped playing. The air hummed with the electricity of downfall. I walked past Ryan, my heels echoing like a countdown. As I passed Monica, I leaned in just enough for her to hear. "Class," I whispered, "isn't about what you wear. It's about what you can't be bought to do." She didn't respond. Her eyes were glass. At the exit, flashes still burst behind me. I could hear voices rising, shouts, accusations, the unraveling of a legacy built on lies. But all of it faded as I stepped into the night air. The cold hit my face like a baptism. Outside the city was alive sirens' engines, streetlights flickering on one by one. I walked down the steps slowly, the binder clutched against my chest. A few reporters followed, calling my name. "Mrs. Carter, Mrs. Carter. How did you expose them? What made you do it?" I turned once, meeting their cameras head on. "They taught me my worth," I said, and I finally believed them. The flashes caught the tears glistening in my eyes. I wasn't crying out of sorrow. They were the tears that come after holding your breath for too many years, the release of survival. When I reached the sidewalk, I saw Doris waiting in her car across the street. She rolled down the window, grinning. "Well, she said you certainly know how to end a party." I got in beside her. "Did the cameras get it?" "Every word," she said. "You're trending already." I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Imagine that. Took me 72 years to go viral." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did it, Linda. You didn't just win. You taught them something they'll never forget." I looked out the window at the glittering city. Maybe I said, But what I really taught was myself. She drove in silence for a while. Then, as we turned onto my street, she asked, "So what now?" I smiled faintly. Now I rest, then I rebuild. Not money, something better, peace. When she dropped me off, I stood on the porch for a moment, looking up at the night sky. The stars were faint, but they were there, constant, honest. Inside, I placed the binder on the table one last time and poured myself a cup of tea. The steam curled up like smoke from an extinguished fire. I sat in the quiet and let the enormity of it all wash over me, the noise, the lights, the fall, the freedom. Somewhere the news was spreading. The headlines would call me the woman who owned the table. They'd make me a symbol, maybe even a legend. But to me, I was just Linda, a mother who learned that silence feeds monsters, and that truth, even whispered, can burn empires down. I took a sip of tea and smiled. If you had the chance to stand in front of everyone who mocked you, everyone who doubted you and prove that your worth couldn't be stolen, would you take it? Comment 1, if you would. Like if you'd rather walk away and let justice speak for itself. Because that night, under the glittering chandeliers of their downfall, I didn't just expose thieves. I reclaimed my name and reminded the world that some tables only exist because a mother built them. By morning, my name was everywhere. Not Mom, not Mrs. Carter, not the quiet accountant from the suburbs. Just Linda Carter, the woman who walked into a room of millionaires and burned down a dynasty with a binder. The news channels played the footage on repeat, my gray dress, the red binder, the moment Henderson's smile cracked in front of the cameras. The internet crowned me in headlines I hadn't asked for. The woman who owned the table, the grandmother of justice. Doris called at dawn. "You're on every station," she said, laughing. "CNN, BBC, even TikTok. They're calling you the quiet storm." I wasn't quiet, I said softly. They just weren't listening until now. Outside reporters crowded the end of my driveway. I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. The story was already bigger than me. When truth finally catches flame, it doesn't need gasoline, it spreads on its own. By noon, the world had turned my pain into a lesson. Women sent letters, messages, flowers. One email read, "You gave me courage to stand up to my son-in-law who took my pension." Another said, "You showed us that dignity doesn't retire." Even strangers on the street nodded when I passed. Not pitying nods, not polite ones, respectful, as if they saw themselves in me. Meanwhile, the Hendersons were collapsing in real time. Their lawyers issued hollow statements denying knowledge of the fraud. Monica's parents fled to Florida to avoid the media. Ryan's name was plastered across financial reports under the words pending investigation. But this time I didn't rejoice. I didn't smile. The victory was loud, but my heart stayed quiet. I hadn't set out to destroy anyone. I'd simply told the truth, and the truth had done what it always does, cut clean and deep. That evening, the neighborhood gathered outside my house. They brought casseroles, flowers, a bottle of champagne someone had kept for a special occasion. Doris stood beside me on the porch, waving at the small crowd. "You've become the talk of the block," she teased. I smiled faintly. "That's new. Usually they just talk about my yard needing trimming." Then from the crowd, a man stepped forward. I recognized him, Mr. Henderson's former chauffeur. His uniform was gone. He wore a plain shirt now, his shoulders lighter. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "I worked for them 10 years. I saw things. You did what no one else could. You made people believe that the little ones matter." His voice trembled. I wanted to say something wise, but all I managed was, "We all matter. They just forget until someone reminds them." A woman called out, "Mrs. Carter, are you going to rebuild the company?" I shook my head. "No, I don't build empires anymore. I build peace." The crowd clapped, simple and sincere. For a moment I thought how strange it was to be applauded for surviving. Then I realized that's what most people crave, not admiration, just proof that their endurance means something. Later that night, Ethan stopped by. He carried a box of files and a tired smile. "The case is closing," he said. "They've started seizing the assets. You'll get restitution, maybe even compensation. You could be very wealthy soon." I laughed quietly. "Wealthy, I've been poor and invisible. Trust me, peace pays better." He smiled. "You know, you've inspired a lot of people. The DA's office got a dozen calls from women your age asking about filing fraud reports. They call it the Carter effect." "The Carter effect," I repeated, shaking my head. "Sounds like a weather pattern." He grinned. "Maybe it is. You changed the atmosphere." After he left, I sat by the window watching the glow of distant city lights. The fire had spread, yes, but not the fire of destruction. It was illumination, the kind that exposes rot but also lights paths for others. A local news van parked outside. The reporter stepped out holding a microphone. "Mrs. Carter," she called, "would you give a statement?" I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The camera's red light blinked. "What do you want people to know after all this?" she asked. I looked into the lens. "That truth has no expiration date," I said. "That no matter how small your voice feels, it still echoes when you speak from dignity. And that it's never too late to stop being silent." She nodded, visibly moved. "Do you regret anything?" I smiled faintly, only waiting so long to stand up. The next morning, I woke to quiet again. The crowds had gone, the reporters moved on, but the phone kept ringing. Messages poured in from strangers, thanking me, sharing their stories. Each one was a spark. Each one said, "You're not alone." And for the first time in years, I believed it. If the world ignored you your entire life, but one act of truth could wake it up, would you do it, even if it cost you everything? Comment 1. If you would, like if you'd rather live quietly but live free. Because that's what truth is in the end, a fire. And once it starts, it doesn't just burn the guilty, it lights the way for everyone still afraid of the dark. 6 months passed. The world moved on as it always does. Headlines faded, the cameras turned elsewhere, and what had once been a scandal became a cautionary tale whispered in business schools and family kitchens. But for me, life had returned to its quiet rhythm. Tea in the morning, walks in the evening, and silence that no longer hurt. The Henderson mansion was sold to pay restitution. Their name came down from the company's glass facade like a crown stripped from a fallen king. Monica filed for divorce. Her diamond ring sold at auction, her smile erased from social media. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson faced charges for conspiracy and financial fraud. The last I heard, they'd fled the state. Ryan didn't. He took the plea deal. Ethan arranged cooperation in exchange for leniency. The court spared him prison, but not consequence. He lost his home, his job, and every illusion he'd ever bought. When the judgment came down, I didn't attend the hearing. I didn't need to. Justice, I had learned, didn't always need an audience. One gray morning, he showed up at my door again. No suit, no arrogance, just a man in jeans and an old sweatshirt holding a paper bag. Inside were donuts. "I figured you still liked the sugar ones," he said quietly. I let him in. We sat at the table that had once been our battlefield, 2 cups of coffee steaming between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "I'm working at a construction site now. It's not much, but it's honest." "Honest," I repeated, nodding slowly. "That's a good start." He looked down at his hands. "They all hate me. The papers, the people, even Monica. Maybe that's what starting over feels like," I said. He swallowed hard. "I wanted to hate you too," he admitted, "but I couldn't. Every time I thought about what you did, I realized you didn't destroy me, Mom. You saved me." The word mom landed like a stone in still water, small but with ripples. I hadn't heard it from him in months. I met his eyes. "I didn't save you, Ryan. You fell and I let you hit the ground. The saving part was up to you." He nodded, tears welling. "I know. I wish it didn't take losing everything to see what really mattered." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I hadn't seen in years, humility, maybe even remorse. "You didn't lose everything," I said softly. "You're still here. And you can still choose who you become next." We finished our coffee in silence. Before leaving, he turned at the door. "Can I come by sometimes? Not to talk about the past, just to be here." I smiled faintly. "We'll see." When he was gone, I stood by the window watching him walk down the street. His shoulders were slumped, but his steps were steady. Maybe that was enough. That night I lit a candle in the living room. The flame flickered gently against the walls, dancing in the quiet. I took the red binder from the shelf, opened it one last time, and placed inside a letter I'd written not for the courts, not for the press, but for him. It read, "My son, the world will call what I did revenge." But it wasn't. It was truth dressed in courage. You can rebuild what you broke, but only if you remember this money can buy comfort, not character. And a man who trades his integrity for acceptance will always be homeless no matter how big his house is. If you ever forget, come sit at this table. It's still yours. Not because you deserve it, but because I still believe you can. I closed the binder and placed it back on the shelf. Then I poured myself another cup of tea, sat by the window, and listened to the city hum, steady, alive, unbothered. Peace, I realized, doesn't come from winning. It comes from finally being done with the fight. If someone took everything from you, but in the end you found yourself again, would you call it loss or would you call it rebirth? Comment 1 if you'd choose rebirth, like if you'd still choose justice. Because that's all I ever wanted, not revenge, not glory, just the quiet dignity of knowing I survived, and I stood tall while the world finally listened. And this time, no one will ever sit me away from the head of the table again. Morning always finds me before I'm ready. It slips through the curtains in pale streaks of gold, warming the wooden floor, touching the framed photographs, and resting on the red binder that still sits on the shelf, the silent witness to everything that happened. 6 months ago, that binder was my weapon. Now it's just paper and ink. The war is over. I wake earlier these days, not because I have to, but because peace has a rhythm you don't want to miss. I brew coffee, feed the sparrows that gather by my window, and sit at the same kitchen table that once carried the weight of my humiliation and my redemption. The table is scratched now, uneven from years of use, but it's mine, and that's enough. People still write. Letters from strangers, students, even journalists who want to turn my story into a book or a film. I thank them politely and decline. I've had enough audiences. The only applause I need now comes from the quiet. Sometimes I take walks through the city. I pass by the courthouse where I signed the complaint, the cafe where Doris first handed me the folder, the office where Ethan smiled and said, "You've got them cornered." The city feels smaller now, like I can finally breathe in it. People recognize me. Sometimes they nod, smile, whisper my name, but no one says poor anymore. That word died with the Henderson's empire. Last week, I visited Ryan at the construction site. He was up on scaffolding wearing a hard hat, dust clinging to his clothes. When he saw me, his eyes softened. He climbed down and walked over, awkward but earnest. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know," I replied. "That's why I did." He smiled, a real one, not the hollow grin he used to wear. "I'm saving up," he said. "Nothing big, just enough to start again." "That's a good kind of saving," I told him. "The kind that adds value, not numbers." We didn't say much else. We didn't need to. Some silences are wounds. Others are bridges. When I left, I looked back once. He was already climbing again, steady, careful. For the first time in years, I didn't see a stranger. I saw my son. Not the man who betrayed me, but the boy who used to build towers out of toy blocks on this very kitchen floor. Towers that always fell and that he always rebuilt. That night, I wrote in my journal something I hadn't done since before it all began. "Forgiveness isn't forgetting," I wrote. "It's remembering without needing revenge." I closed the book, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness settle like a blanket. Now, as I sit by the window watching the sunrise, I realized that this story was never about money. It was about worth, the kind no one can deposit or steal. They tried to buy respect, but I learned that respect is earned one quiet act of truth at a time. Doris visits often. We drink tea, talk about her garden, laugh about how I once thought I'd never sleep again. She teases me, says I should write a memoir. Call it The Ledger of Justice, she jokes. I tell her no one would read it. She says they already have in the way people now look at women like us differently. Ethan still checks in, sending updates about other cases inspired by mine. "You started something," he says. I tell him I didn't start anything new. I just reminded the world of something old, that dignity isn't a luxury. It's a right. Sometimes at night, I dream of the gala again. The chandeliers, the faces, the gasps. But in the dream, it's quiet. The lights dim. The crowd fades, and there's only me standing at the head of that table, not as a guest, not as a mother, not as a victim, but as a woman who finally took her place. In the morning, when I wake, the dream lingers like perfume. It doesn't haunt me anymore. It reminds me that even when everything collapses, there's always something left standing if you've built it with truth. Before bed each night, I light a small candle and whisper a line I wrote years ago. Before any of this began, a line I didn't understand until now. Peace doesn't mean the fire is gone. It means it finally has a home. If you had to walk through fire to find your peace, would you do it? Comment 1 if you would. Like if you believe that sometimes the quietest battles create the loudest victories. Because in the end, this wasn't just my story. It was every woman who's ever been dismissed, every mother who's ever been silenced, every person who's ever been told to sit away from the head of the table. I look out the window one last time, the sun now full and bright, spilling gold across the kitchen. My reflection stares back older, steadier, unafraid, and I whisper more to myself than anyone else. I own the table, but what mattered more is that I own myself.